Okay, so what is action learning then? Action learning is essentially a problem-solving forum. It's a group of people who come together to support one another in the issues or the opportunities that they have, that they're experiencing in that moment in time. So it's quite different to some other ways that we might solve problems within teams or within organizations, in that it is not usually a place for giving ideas and giving of solutions. It is very much about the presenter being the expert in their own problem. So the person bringing the problem knows the problem best from their own perspective, from their own frame of reference, and therefore we all subscribe to the idea that that person knows the best solutions for their particular problem. So action learning is very much what we would call a non-directive format or a non-directive approach, in that we do not direct the person to the solution that we think is best for them. We help them to explore their problem or their opportunity, because it isn't always a problem. It's sometimes, I've got this new promotion coming, or I've got this new piece of work coming. We help them to explore that so that they can find a solution that works within their experience, within their skill set, within what it is that they think is important, within their values. So that's a really important distinction between action learning and some other ways that you might solve problems within your teams. And there's a phrase that's used within action learning, comrades in adversity. There's this idea that as a group, we are working together, we are the support network for that individual who is having the problem, but without solving it for them. It's also really, sorry, go on, Alison.
Can I just come in at that point as well and say that by providing that support and also by providing that space really for individuals to reflect and really think through their issue, then that is a very powerful approach as well, especially when we're all busy, sort of carving out some time within the day to really focus on something deeply and carefully, and often from different perspectives that the different set members will bring through their questions is really valuable.
Excellent, thanks Ali. Yeah, so that's one of the benefits really that I would share with you in terms of my experience around being a set member. So I've been in a set for about 13 years now, and it is that safe space. It's a place where I know I can share the craziest ideas, and I can talk openly and freely within my set about the issue without any fears of breaches of confidentiality or people judging my decisions or my thoughts or my actions. But as Ali said, it's that time to pause and really think about that problem from lots of different perspectives. That is one of the key benefits of action learning. As I've mentioned, it isn't just a talking shop though, and it's not a bouncing off of ideas. There are some universal principles that no matter how you structure your action learning set, that we all subscribe to. So those are quite important for you to understand before we show you the set. So I'm just going to go through them really briefly. One is that there is a set structure to it, or a process to it. So it isn't a free-for-all. There is usually a set process. Every set will have a different process of some description. They might do things in a slightly different order or call things something slightly different, but they all do have that set structure, and that allows the set to sort of be freer really to explore things because they have that solid structure to work to. As I mentioned, it uses that non-directive approach, so it really is about exploration and curiosity, and that we would always aim to make sure that the individual who's bringing the problem holds the responsibility, holds the actions for themselves, that we don't take on that responsibility from them. There's also, it has to be a group. We call it a set, but it's a group. And usually that group size is around 5 to 8 or 5 to 9 people. Our set is going to be a little smaller today, as you'll see, but hopefully just as impactful. Usually you would want to have at least 5 people in your set. And each person in the set has a set role. So there are 3 roles within an action learning set. One is the presenter, which, as Kim has alluded to, is the person who brings a problem. And that should rotate within a regularly occurring set. So you would have different people having, bringing their problem to each set. But there is always there's one presenter. Then you have set members. So those are the people that ask the questions, that listen without judgment, that do some feeding back and summarising. They're the people who sort of bring the process to life and support and become those comrades in adversity. And then really importantly, you have a designated facilitator. It doesn't work without a designated facilitator. If you say, oh, we'll just all facilitate it together, that doesn't work. You have to have, even if that's rotated again, it has to be a person who is designated for that set to manage the process, to ensure that the presenter is okay, to check in with the presenter, to make sure the group members are okay, to keep an eye on the non-directive approach, to walk you through where you should be through the process. And that's one of the reasons, why action learning is so beneficial, is because you have that person who is managing that process. And it's a really difficult role. It took me a very long time to gain my confidence as a facilitator, because it feels like quite a big role and it feels like quite a big responsibility. But once you have learned how to do it, and once you have practiced that and been involved in that, then it becomes easier with every set that you do. Obviously, you've probably seen that we do run an action learning set facilitators program, and we just wanted to take a moment just to say to you, if you were interested in hearing more about that, then please do get in contact with us. It's a very comprehensive program where we take you through the full process of becoming an action learning set facilitator. There's an ILM approved stamp on this program that you'll be able to go for, so you'll get a certificate as a facilitator. But really importantly, it's got practical application. There's the experience of being in a set, lots of sets throughout the program, and facilitating sets and getting feedback on your facilitation. So it's a really great program, which if anyone is interested in joining, if you mention that you have seen this webinar, even if it's the recorded version, then we'll offer you a 10% discount on the cost of the program as well, just for being part of this today.
Nat, can I just sort of say the emphasis really on that program is really to build your skills and also your confidence to be able to be a facilitator within a set. So as with all of our programs, the emphasis is really on the practical.
Absolutely, and that's really important, I think, with a lot of the things that we do, but especially with action learning. You can't be an action learning set facilitator by theory alone. You have to actually have a go and learn from it, and sort of practice that skill set. So we're going to go into our demo set in a second, just quickly before we do. So as I said, our group's a bit smaller than we would usually have, but we're hoping we're going to have some great questions from you as well. In a sec, I'm going to share with you some potential questions that you can use in a Word doc, in a Word document. So you'll be able to get involved in the questioning with us, and you can do that via chat. So if you think, oh, this is a question I'd like to ask here, using a non-directive style, so not putting in a solution, not giving an idea, and not putting any judgment into it, then you can pop that into the chat, and when the time comes up, we will bring as many of those questions as we can into the process. Alison will also be taking a role in terms of, I called her the narrator earlier, I'm not sure that's the right term, but she's going to almost be talking us through the process. So I will facilitate the set. Alison and Jenny will be the set members, Kim will be the presenter, but at some point Alison might freeze the process and we'll have a little bit of a chat about what's going on, and we'd love for you to be involved in that as much as you possibly can, but also please do pop your questions or thoughts into the chat as we go through that.
Thank you, Nat. And just to say that freezing the set isn't usually something you do in real life. This is just really for the benefit of you all today, to highlight some points that might be interesting of youth. And I'm going to do this. So if I do that, that's a sort of timeout, little pause, and I might sort of shine a light on what's actually happening in that moment for your benefit, hopefully.
Lovely, thanks, Ali. We're using a pared down version of our usual structure today because we don't have a lot of time. So we're just going to have 3 basic elements to our set. So the first one is presentation of the problem and brief clarification to make sure that we all understand the problem. Then we're going to move into an exploration stage and problem solving. And then finally a call to action where Kim will hopefully decide on a couple of actions that she'd like to take away for her problem. So yes, please do get involved and we will have Q&A at the end. So we're going to start the process with a few minutes from Kim telling us about the problem and what it means to her at the moment. And I'm going to share those questions with you in the chat while she does that.
Okay, thank you so much. So my problem is we've got a new starter in the team and very recent, literally this week. And while we've sort of had a handover period from the previous staff member moving on and the new person coming in, there's been a lot of roles and tasks that wouldn't usually come to me, that have been coming to me recently that I've been doing sort of in the handover. And now I'm quite aware, now this person is, you know, really fresh in post, I'm sort of thinking about how I manage and how I start handing those things back over, but really, first of all, getting the balance of, I don't want to just throw them in at the deep end and here's a load of jobs for you, off you go. So sort of balancing, not overwhelming them with a lot of new stuff. Some stuff they may have never done before, some things they may have experience of, but not maybe the way we do it. So certainly the first part of my problem is how do I start giving those tasks over without overwhelming them? And the sort of part 2 is around also, I know myself and I know when I have a task, and I can see Jenny smiling because she knows what I'm going to say, I can find it sometimes hard to let go and fully just go, okay, I've given you the task and now I'm stepping back. So managing that balance between not just throwing things at the new person and saying, right, these are yours now, I wash my hands of it, but also managing that balance of knowing when to step away, when to see, right, they've got this, I can back off now. So that's my sort of overview.
Really come in here because what you usually find is when people bring their issue to the set, when they present their issue, that most of the set members think, I can see a bit of myself in that. So I've been in this situation before, or I'm a bit like that in terms of holding on to work and finding it difficult to give things over. So in that respect, everyone learns within an action learning set, not just the person who's presenting. And the other thing worth mentioning is sometimes people will bring issues that seem quite simple, and we wonder why it's difficult for them. And sometimes people will share that. Kim did a little bit. She shared that it's quite difficult for her to hand things over. Sometimes they won't. But as set members, the best way to approach this is to really dial up your curiosity. Okay, so listen really carefully and dial up your curiosity and sort of start asking yourself, I wonder why she finds that hard. I wonder what it is about this situation that is difficult for her. And that will lead you to some really good questions. Thank you. Sorry, Kim.
Thanks, Ali, and thanks for that, Kim. That was a really concise overview. Are there any questions? At this point, we do questions of clarification. So a question for clarification is not about trying to solve the problem yet. This is around how do we make sure that we have a good understanding or enough of an understanding of what Kim is saying that we can ask clear questions, clean questions, that we are not going down a route of assumptions. That's the key point, is that we're not assuming what Kim is thinking, feeling or doing. So this is the point where we're just trying to make sure that we have a clarity. Are there any clarification questions that anyone would like to share? There are some examples in the handout that I've just shared with you in the chat. Please do pop them into the chat, or please do come off mute, and if anyone has one for Kim, we can see where that goes. Thanks, Dawn.
That's a good question. What are you finding most challenging? I think for me, the most challenging thing is finding that balance in that it's a new person. I want to suppose I want to make a good impression on them. I want to have a good working relationship with them. So I certainly don't want them sort of being in a position where they're like, who is this person? I've literally been here 2 days and I'm just getting tasks from all directions. But equally, I don't want them thinking, right, they've given me this task. Why are they not backing off and just letting me do it as well? So I think it's me maybe overthinking a little about how our relationship will be going forward with someone that I've only met a handful of times at this point.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dawn. Great question. I've got a quick clarification question, if that's okay. Normally the facilitator wouldn't get involved in the questioning, just to be really clear, but because we're a small set, I do sometimes ask a few questions if need, you know, if there's not a lot of people. But you said earlier about handing things back and how you know, knowing the rate at which to hand that back. Do you have a good handle on exactly what you need to hand back, or is there some confusion in your mind about how much you're keeping and how much this new person is doing?
There's a little bit of clarity on most things. So most things I've got a good idea of this will sit with this person. It's more, I think timescales are maybe less clear because it all depends on, you know, when that, what else they have coming from other people, when they get to grips that they can fully take something on and be running with it independently. So which tasks specifically, I think, is quite clear to me. Maybe timescales of when and to what extent they're working on particular projects independently is maybe less clear, because it will depend on the person.
Okay, I'm going to pause again there, if that's okay, because what you might have noticed is that Kim is starting to understand what it is that she does want, and what it is that she does need within this situation. So it's not understanding what tasks need to be handed over, but it's something about the timescales. And as you also mentioned earlier, and this is where you really listen for the words that the person's using, she mentioned the word balance. So she wants to get the balance right. Okay, so in terms of dialing up our curiosity, I'm interested to know what that balance looks like. Okay, so Kim, over to you. When you achieve, you know, if you get the balance right, what does it look like?
I think the right balance for me would be where I think it comes down to the relationship as well, in that I want the new person to feel completely comfortable to say to me, hold on a minute now, you've given me a lot this week, let's steady on. Or equally, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I feel I know what I'm doing with this. You don't need to give me any more sort of guidance on this. I'm good to go. I'm good to run. And I think I'm just quite aware of how I set the tone initially is how comfortable that person will feel in saying that, and being sort of open and honest about where they are, which will really help as well. But I didn't answer that question very well then. I went off on a bit of a tangent there.
It's never really about whether you answer the question for us, Kim, it's whether you answer the question for yourself. So unless there's a lack of clarity there for you that you want to explore, you don't need to provide any insight for us. So how does that feel for you at the minute?
No, definitely. It's definitely switched my thinking a little, in that obviously I was asked to think of a problem coming in. I had a very clear thought of what my problem was, whereas now I'm actually thinking it's less about the work itself and more about how, you know, it's a new person, and maybe am I potentially projecting how I feel going into a new environment, new people, and worrying too much about what are they going to think of me if I do this, if I do that, and that side of it. So again, it's sort of having clarity of roles and timescales will really help that we all work together in a really good way.
Okay, I'm going to pause there, because what you'll see there is Kim starting to question some of the assumptions that she might have made bringing into this situation, which also really helps her to understand things, including herself, more deeply, and therefore start to get a better idea of what it is that she really wants to work out. Okay, thank you, Kim.
Jenny, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, you've used the word relationships a couple of times, and just now you said about setting the tone. So what tone would you like to set with this relationship?
I want a really good, positive working relationship where I'm working with someone that feels very happy to challenge me and to say, you know, you're holding on to this piece of work. Is that something that you need to be holding on? Should you be handing that over? Or equally, you know, you're throwing things at me at a rate that is not manageable here. I want to have someone open and be able to feel comfortable in coming to me with those things, as I feel that I feel comfortable with the rest of the team.
Lovely. We do have another question from Dawn, but I might hold on to that until we have moved into the next stage. I'm just going to ask you, Kim, do you feel ready to set a nutshell? A nutshell is basically your problem in a sentence, and that just helps us to really have something to focus on for the rest of the set. Usually we would use something like, I don't know how to, or how can I, to start the sentence, but you can start the sentence of your nutshell in whatever way you see fit.
Okay. I don't know how to balance handing over work to the new starter without overwhelming them, but also being able to balance letting go when it's time.
Might need to say that again. I'm not that fast typing.
I don't know how to balance handing over work to the new starter without overwhelming them, but also being able to let go when it's time.
Okay, so I'm going to say here as well that it sounds like Kim might have lost the relationship bit as well.
I was just about to say that.
Sorry, Nat, you were going to say, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Step in. So Nat, you do that. You step in.
Yeah, exactly right. So as a facilitator, I'm just going to challenge you on that, Kim, in terms of you just spent a bit of time talking about how it probably wasn't much about the tasks and more about the relationship. How does that fit in with the nutshell that you've just sort of vocalized there?
Yeah, I suppose it doesn't. So one leads to the other of sorts, but I suppose what would be a more appropriate nutshell would be, well, and this is always a good sign when someone's taking time to think that it's not an automatic.
Absolutely.
That's the excuse I'm sticking to. I don't know how to set an, oh, this is tough. I don't know how to, I would like some support with, I'd say would be a better, I would like some support with setting an open and approachable relationship with the new starter right from the beginning.
So when we talk about action learning, it's we need to remember that the action stands with, you know, the problem lies with you. So again, I'm just going to briefly sort of discuss that first bit. I would like some support, almost sort of says to me, I need someone else to do something here. So how can you turn that into something, and it may be just as simple as, how do I set an open and approachable relationship with a new starter, rather than I would like some support. It's your nutshell, but how does that sound to you?
No, I think that definitely matches what I was trying to sort of say in my head.
Yes, lovely, great. I'm just putting that in. How do I set up an open and approachable relationship with a new starter?
I'm just going to pause you there, because we kind of almost, we're sort of combining two things here. So there's something about not overwhelming the new starter, letting go, but also setting up that open and approachable relationship. So 3 different strands going on, but so long as Kim's got clarity at that point, then we're ready to move on to the next bit of our set.
Absolutely. So in the interest of time, I think we'll take questions from any of, because we've done quite a lot of the goal. I think we've got a bit of the goal questions already done there. We've done a little bit around reality, what's going on at the moment, what's the situation currently, although we could probably have a couple more questions. So it's absolutely fine, because of in the interest of time, for us to sort of do a little bit of reality, but maybe going into the options questions here with you, Kim, if that's okay. Yeah. Great. Okay, so what exploration questions or idea generating questions do we have for Kim here? So we've got that one from Dawn, and we've also got one that's just come in from Jenna. Thanks, Jenna. Lovely. There's a couple in the chat, Kim, if you want to pick and choose the ones you'd like to answer.
Okay. Jenna, great question. What are the different ways in which you could approach this issue? I think a sit-down conversation with the person. How do they prefer to work? One thing I've already done is sort of explored when it comes to the giving of tasks, how do they best prefer to receive them? So for example, do they want, because I work from home a lot, so would they prefer, a little Teams message or an email or regular sort of virtual sort of face-to-face catch-ups? So we've explored that. So maybe I could have a more sort of in-depth conversation about, how they feel about sort of letting me know if they're nearing maybe capacity, or for me to have a better idea of where their tasks are coming from elsewhere in the team. So it won't be just me handing things over. So I think one option is definitely to have a conversation with them about how they best like to work.
Okay, I'm going to pause at this point and just sort of say, sometimes some of the solutions that people come up with and options for moving forward are quite simple, but they're ready to move into that stage because they've explored their issue a bit more deeply, and the support and just the space to think means that they can come up with things that maybe they didn't consider beforehand. So Kim, is that something you thought about beforehand, actually sitting down and having that really frank conversation and saying, how do you want to do this?
It was something certainly that I considered, but then I know myself that I'm quite the overthinker. So I was sort of thinking about, if I was in a new role and someone sat me down and had that conversation, would I see it for what it was, of a really friendly, let's have a good relationship going forward? Or would I sort of think, oh, there's boundaries being set from the beginning, what should I be wary of, and that sort of thing. But again, that's me and my overthinking, not this person. So again, being open to just having that conversation in a really friendly way. I've seen another question come up in the chat as well from Jenna, who might be able to help. And that's a really good one as well, because we've all been new at some point. So I think linking in with my other colleagues that have also been new, and maybe sort of saying, what would have been useful for you when you first sort of joined the organisation? What would have been really beneficial? How would you like to be approached about sort of having that relationship and that balance of work going forward? So I could definitely, I'm particularly thinking, going to have a chat with Jenny about what Jenny, when Jenny was new, what she would have found really useful.
Great, thank you, Kim. Any other questions from anybody? Anyone like to come off mute and ask a question? There's a couple more in the chat coming in, if there's any that you'd like to answer, Kim.
I was going to ask him as well. You talked earlier about you wanted this relation to be like you have with other team members. So what's helped you set the tone for your other relationships that are how you would like them to be?
I think what's been really useful is sort of the way we approach things as a team in general, that everyone has an equal voice and we all, quite open, and insights as well has been really useful, that we know how each of us have our preferences around how we work. And that's, again, it's from the start, it's been open and honest conversation about how we prefer to work, what works for us, what makes a good day, what makes a not so good day, and knowing each other as we do, which I suppose will come from time and getting to know the new person as well. And again, it very much could be that I'm stressing about absolutely nothing and it's going to be absolutely marvellous. But yeah, I think definitely, actually that's a good idea. I think actually looking into her insights to see how we could work there. knowing how the colours sort of interact and if there's anything I need to be adapting within the way I know that I like to work.
Lovely, really great to see those insights, colours coming in there, because they're a key part of you know, how we might use action learning as well, is bringing in other things that we know about, other models. If you use a particular psychometric tool like we do in Leaderful Action in your organisation, bringing some of that in, bringing some of your learning in that you might do as a team is a really great way of doing it. So great that you've picked that up, Kim. I'm just going to refer you to a question that's popped into the chat from Craig. How would you know your problem of overwhelming? Sorry, how would you know your problem is overwhelming the colleague? So how would you know that is happening? Great question.
Well, I think I'd like to know by them being able to just say, you know, oh, you've given me quite enough now. Let me get my head around this task before I sort of start taking on new stuff again. Because I very much remember that, you know, when I joined Leaderful Action, it was a new field of work. It was lots of new and exciting stuff. And at some points it was like, well, let me just get this bit into my head before the next thing comes. So I'd hope it would either not happen because I've got to maintain that balance, or if it was sort of getting close to happening, that they would feel able to say, can we pause there? I'm sort of taking on a bit too much. What my concern would be is that if they didn't feel comfortable to say, am I going to see it, and that maybe they're not enjoying their role, they're not getting the most out of their new experience with us because they feel absolutely sort of swamped with things, and that's what I really don't want to happen.
I might just pause at this point because I think that's a really lovely question there. How would you know if this is happening? Because that sort of is a level of depth that maybe we haven't considered before. So Kim can really start to think about the pointers that she might see in her team member. You know, what is it that she might observe if there were problems? And that helps her to overcome some of the assumptions that she's making. She's got something she can look out for rather than relying solely on her own experience.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so it might be that I'm sort of seeing, you know, if things aren't maybe getting done, if maybe they've not been able to complete things, or if they might seem stressed. They might seem maybe not as enthusiastic when I'm giving a piece of work as maybe they were initially, that sort of thing. So it's definitely useful to be thinking about that and keeping an eye on that.
Brilliant, thanks Kim. Now obviously we could continue to explore this. There's probably lots of richness in there that we could have delved into, but in the interest of time I'm going to move us on to the third and final part of the structure, which is a call to action. So here, Kim, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the options that I've heard you mention, and then I'm going to ask you to do your call to action, which is what are you going to take forward? What actions are you going to take out? So what I heard was that you could sit down with the new starter and talk to them about how they prefer to work and how they prefer to communicate, although you did have some hesitation there about it maybe feeling too formal or setting a tone in terms of, you know, this is a very straight-laced way of working. You also said around linking in with other colleagues to find out what would have been useful for them when they first started, so that you can use some of the techniques there. You also said that you could lean on our culture around how open we are and approachable and friendly, and just continue to do that. You also mentioned about looking at the insights profile and seeing where adaptations could be made. And then finally, you just talked about keeping an eye out for some indicators that overwhelm might be happening. Which of those, if any, would you like to take forward?
I think keeping out for the indicators, first of all, is I think an essential one, because if it is happening, I certainly want to be supporting the person to prevent that from going any further. I think insights as well is a really good shout. I think we've got a team day coming up, so that would be a really good opportunity to look at you know, our new team dynamic and look at the colours there, and really from the outset, sort of, because I know I know aspects of sort of my preferences around working don't work for everyone. I'm particularly blue, and you know, and I do love a process. So I've got to sometimes remind myself before I'm firing off sort of on Teams, have we got an answer on blah, 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 blah? Oh, apologies. Good morning. How are you? Can we blah, 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 blah? So I know what I need to work on. So in having that sort of awareness of how best they like to work, I think that'll make for a really good working relationship. And I think I will have a coffee with them. I'll ask them to have a chat, informal chat, just about maybe what I can be doing to make their new experience here the best it can be, how they'd like to be given their tasks, and sort of just have that open conversation, and hopefully that will get us off on the right foot.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. I've popped those into the chat so that you can save those and take them away. That's the process in its sort of most basic form. So now it's over to you to ask if you have any comments or questions. We'd love to see your faces if you're happy to come on camera and obviously be on the recording, but if not, please just come off mute, or please just pop something into the chat. This is a conversation rather than a lecture. Dawn.
That just to say as well, like it's the progress that Kim's managed to make in a really short space of time as well. So you've got a plan, and that's always nice. And it's also a really great way of giving people control back, because sometimes you bring an issue to the set and you don't think there's any way you can go with it, or you something that's troubling you, but that plan that you leave with really does put that control back with you.
Lovely.
Thanks, Kim.
Dawn, a question from you.
Yeah, just the one around the sort of generating options and exploring really is how would you overcome a situation where the presenter can't come up with any ideas?
Absolutely great question. I'll start off on that one if that's okay, everyone, and then if you've got any other thoughts, please do jump in. It doesn't happen as often as you think it might, actually, if you do a really good job at the goal stage and the reality stage. If you take the time, we would have taken longer probably at that stage with Kim if we had more time, but if you do a really good job of exploring the problem, normally by the time they get to the options, there's normally a couple brewing already, but if there isn't, then there's a couple of things I like to do. So I like to ask a few out there sort of questions. You've seen an example of mine. What's the craziest thing you could do? Or if you woke up tomorrow and a fairy had been in the night and waved their magic wand and everything was perfect, what would have happened to have achieved that, or what would you do if you had complete control and power over everything? So I would ask or use some alternative, less conventional or less safe questions to try and get them to think in a slightly different way, or I might go back to the previous sort of I might go back to the reality stage or the goal stage and explore them a little bit more until they do have a few ideas. And finally, if you really are stuck, you do always have the option to go off process a little bit, and you can be a bit flexible and sort of say, right, if you are really stuck, we don't want to see people sort of uncomfortably trying to search their mind for things. Would you like a couple of ideas that you could mull over and explore? As long as we step back away from that process and don't hold on to the idea that we've given, we let them take it, explore it, and then leave it or move forward with it as and when they see fit. So those are the three sort of options. Go back a step, ask some crazy questions to get them thinking a little bit differently, or use a different technique to try and get them thinking in a different way, or break the process a bit.
Now, can I just come in there about using a different technique? Because there are some other techniques that you can use that do take you, you still sit within the process, but there's other things that you can do. And we cover these on the programme. One of them is called the Goldfish Bowl. So you can ask the presenter to take themselves out of the set, and you can let the set members discuss what they think the person should do while the presenter listens. And then the presenter comes back and the question is, what did you hear that could be useful to you in that? And that can kickstart the process. So there are some tools and techniques that you can use at different stages when you feel like as a facilitator, you need to reach into your toolbox and try something different.
When some of those of you who have been on programs with us, so Nina, Jenna, you'll have heard me, you know, going on about this, but what have you learned on your training program that would be useful here is a great question. Or, you know, what have you learned from other people that could be useful here? So yeah, it's just different types of questions. Thanks, Dawn. That was a great question. And it does come up that people are worried about that as facilitators. What if I freeze and I don't know where to take this? So yeah, we do prepare you for all of that. Any other questions about action learning, about the process that we just went through, about what it feels like to be part of a set, why, you know, why we would use it, how you could use it? No.
Do you have, sorry, me again, do you have ideal length of time for an action learning set?
Yeah, another great question. So ideally, 45 minutes, I would say, is around the maximum. They can sometimes go on longer, particularly in the early stages before a set is really experienced. It takes longer when people are still learning how to be a set and how to ask questions. A more experienced set could do 20 to 30 minutes.
Now we've got another question in chat. Do you need to be skilled in other areas, such as coaching, to facilitate action learning sets?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jen. I think it helps. It really does. It helps if you've got some coaching skills, because it's almost like the cousin of coaching. I always think of. There's lots of similarities, lots of things that make them, you know, sort of ideal, you know, sort of partners in an organization in terms of developing people. So yeah, coaching skills is really good. You obviously need to be able to manage a room. You need to be confident to stop. Again, my groups will know this, you know, the confidence to be able to sort of say, that's not a non-directive question. How can we change that into something that might be more non-directive to be helpful to the presenter? So yeah, you do need to have a bit of confidence to be able to do that, and you need to have great listening skills. Anything else? Anyone done?
Essentially, you those skills are obviously skills, all learnable. And you wouldn't necessarily need to have coaching experience to come on an action learning set facilitation program, because
we would go through that. Yeah, absolutely.
As well as listening, non-directive approaches, managing the room, managing sets remotely, all of that stuff.
Great question. Any others before we let you go? Thank you, everyone. This was a bit new for us, so we've never done something quite so interactive. Thanks, Craig. It's great to hear. That was a good refresher. But we've really enjoyed presenting this for you today. If anyone wants to get in touch to have a chat about, ask some questions separate to this, please do give us a shout. If anyone's interested in some information on the action learning set facilitator training, do let us know. And just a reminder, there's that offer for anyone who has signed up to this as well. But if there's no more questions, unless anyone else has got anything they'd like to add.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks very much. And if people have questions and they'd like to stay on, then please do so if you want to make the most of your time. And a very big diolch. Thank you so much to Kim as well for presenting our issue so honestly.
Thank you, Kim. Diolch.